Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. My guest today is an NBC-HWC, is a clinical hypnotherapist, if I get my intro right to be great here, executive functioning specialist, and the founder of the Genosis Theory. Please welcome in the one, the only, Garrett Wood. Garrett, how you doing today, man?
Really excited to be here today, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Well, Garrett, why don't you tell me a little bit more about yourself besides what I've just told them?
Yeah, so Gnosis Therapy is a clinic. I opened it in 2018 to help professionals make sure that they prevent or at least can recover from burnout. Burnout's typically like a workplace phenomenon, it's the way it's decided, but most people feel it really personally, and it actually ends up, even though it's not their fault, it ends up being kind of their responsibility to recover from and prevent it in the first place. So,
I think burnout's a very interesting topic because we all experience it nowadays. I think with COVID, it really was getting really bad for people because, a lot of the people, especially that were stuck still working in the workforce that couldn't be remote, it was rougher on them because they had so many different restrictions and, everybody trying to, make it with the prices, everything going up and stuff like that too. I think a lot of people tend to get burned out and just don't realize that's what's happening to them.
absolutely. The day-to-day stress starts climbing, and then they're getting less and less return on it, it feels like, versus their cost of living. So then they have to work even more and have even less for it. And that's taken its toll for sure.
So, I know burnout's a big thing. Is this something that you've always been passionate about? I mean, because it's an interesting topic to get into, but it's a real good hot button issue, though, if you think about it nowadays, especially with a lot of the workforce getting to that point where they're just like, oh, I'm just going to quit my job because I can't handle it anymore. And, but I feel like on the other side, the corporate side, a lot of people aren't, doing anything either with it as well. So.
Yeah, the idea that burnout's been kind of a hot topic since 2019, I think, as the World Health Organization came out with an actual definition of it. And they notified that it's like a real medical condition that people are experiencing. Prior to that, it was kind of like a general topic or experience that we've all had with some names around it, but it didn't quite have a formal meaning until then. There's been some research originally for like ICU nurses where the primary healthcare, where they have to provide care for people in these intense situations, but for them to be able to be professional, they don't get to share their emotional reactions, their natural human instincts. And so by holding in those emotions, it's to do their job and be professional. That extra burden was something that they weren't required by the job, but they needed to do it. And that is something they're not getting compensated for, but something that they had to do emotionally. And that seems to be the largest contributing factor to burnout, is that mental emotional fatigue and restraint that we're not able to live with or express as we go about our day to day.
Yeah, it's very true though. But what do you think the corporate side is like? What could they do better, like in their own standing? Because I know we've had somebody on before about burnout, and he said he met with some of these corporate 500 companies and was like, "Hey, if you don't change the way you're doing things, you're not going to be here in 5 years, or you're not going to exist for most of them," which is pretty interesting of a conversational piece.
Yeah, I think historically a lot of our leadership and management models have come from the military. And so there is this like crisis situation where they're trying to get through a conflict. And so anything the leadership wise that works in those environments is great, I guess, but I don't think that actually applies to these long-term changes, because most wars aren't supposed to last for, an entire career. And even moments in crisis in those situations that command and control style leadership models may work for don't translate into day-to-day, week-to-week management styles without a cost. And even with people in the military, we see the dramatic cost of like CPTSD and PTSD that is a similar version of what shows up in burnout as far as it affects the nervous system and the stress that comes with it from chronically being under supported and overtaxed. And so if we're going to try to change that, maybe we need to adopt different leadership styles and different models in the corporate center from the kind of the ground up all the way through. There's a bunch of models out there about relational leadership, where the job of a leader is to actually stay attuned to their team's nervous system. To almost be a parental figure. They're like attachment figure, where if someone on the team is feeling distressed, they need a safe place to go to be able to feel protected and cared for, so they can calm back down. So then they can go back to doing the work that actually matters. And that the more leaders realize that that's primarily their job and their role, the less burnout they experience if they're skilled at it, and the less their team experiences burnout because they feel more supported. And so that work is not really central to the conversation we have in leadership circles and leadership development. And so I think until that changes, we're going to see continued rates of burnout.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it's because it's that old school mentality of just tough it out or suck it up. I luckily have a boss that understands that, because she she knew I was getting kind of burned out, so she brought somebody to help me out. She's like, and the person that came in was like, "Yeah, you're so and so. You said that you're a little burnt out." And I'm like, for her to identify that, that's a hats off right there because that's good leadership to me personally nowadays. Because like if you can tell somebody's getting burnt out and you bring in somebody to support them in that role, that says a lot. As you think about it, like Amazon churns and burns people left and right. Like it's crazy that you hear because that's the one thing you hear from people when they say that they're like, "Oh, Amazon? Oh yeah, Amazon can people goes through people quick." Or like, what is another one? Here in the Texas area where I'm at, Bucky's is another big name that comes up. They're like, "Oh, you know why? Because they're so strict." But I'm like, have you ever been in one of those? It's like a well-oiled machine. Like I could see that though, where people get burned out, but it's because they're so strict in standards of how they do things, because of the volume of things that are going on at once, it does require a lot, but at the same time, I feel like with mental health, we don't do enough for people at these job sites and things like that too. Like they offer like couple free sessions, but I mean, if that's all you're doing, you're really not combating the problem, honestly. Am I not correct about that one?
Yeah, I think one-off solutions are probably more band-aids than they are actual helpful interventions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No matter how effective one intervention is proven to be in isolation, it's not a robust, sustainable solution. Burnout is like a biopsychosocial problem. It's not just contained in one of those factors. Like, sure, if you can actually get nice, full, rested sleep, it's going to be really protective. And if you're not getting it, nothing else really matters. But if you don't have that personal relationship with your supervisor where you feel cared for, that's going to put stress on your system. Even if you're not a type of person that enjoys close personal relationships, just knowing that is important. But also to your point earlier, if we're not able to make a full-time living, even though we're working full-time, and we can't keep a roof over our head without thinking about stressing about those things, that is going to contribute to burnout as well, because we're showing up with base level stresses every day. Even if the workplace is a little bit nicer, even if that relationship with your boss is great, you
Mm-hmm.
still not can't make ends meet. It's still frustrating. It's still challenging in that work environment. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think we're moving in the right direction with the attention around it. I just feel so unfortunate for everybody that's experiencing burnout that it's not there yet for them. Right.
Do you have any tips for anybody that may be experiencing burnout? Like maybe things they could do. I know self care is a big thing we talk about in the mental health space. Like doing something you enjoy and things like that too. Do you have any other kind of tips? Maybe you can give them something to help them out get through the days. Because I know I myself have experienced it pretty bad where I was just like to the point I'm like I'm ready to just walk out this door. I'm tired of it. And luckily my boss is the one that talked me off the ledge because I was close. I was like, this is just I'm just tired. I don't know what it would set me off, but it's just like it's the constant building of things, and I feel like a lot of times they give too much excuses to the people that are not adding value to your team, and you see a lot of these different kind of clips, like Instagram I've been seeing, like, I can't think of what her name is now, but she points it out really well. She's like, a lot of the real good skilled people in your organization are leaving because they're tired of picking up the slack for everybody else, but it feels at times like they're just leaving people in place because there's so many different strict standards of, oh, we just can't get rid of people. I'm like, but you technically can if they're working to the job that you need them to do. Like find somebody and replace them because you're going to eventually upset those real God, what did she say? I can't remember how she's put it, but she said like the high performance workers. There you go. High performance workers, they're going to be
Yeah.
like, well, why am I going to do anything if these guys aren't doing something for me too? Because then they see that and then that adds to the frustration of, well, I'm doing all this work. I'm working extra hard for the same amount of money and they're getting paid the same, but they're doing less than I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that creating a position where you have to do more than one job, right? And maybe you're doing a job for someone else that's also there, but they're not they're not carrying their version of that load. And then the people that are in charge of managing that team aren't making sure that that's accountable for everybody. It's really challenging though, because sometimes these rock stars or these superstars, they burn bright, then they burn out because they're putting in so much time, so much work. They're doing more than they should be doing for their own nervous system, for what they can do. And then eventually they can't afford to quit or leave. They can't afford, and they're burned out on the job. And sometimes I see that happen to a lot of leaders. There's this idea of the Peter principle, which is like a title of a book from a while ago, where you get promoted until you become incompetent, where you are no longer able to meet the demands of the new position, but you don't get fired. You just stay there. And then unfortunately, disincentivizes everybody that works for you.
Yeah,
But
because everybody
oftentimes,
sees that though, because people are watching that. You don't realize that the lower man on the totem pole is watching him. And I kind of feel like that a little bit too. It's like, to me, my thought is simpler. It's close to that too. It's like the more negative you are, the more faster people move. And then the reason I was given was, oh, well, they're not here at the store anymore. I'm like, but so then you put them in front of more people at a different spot, and you're letting them continue the same negative principle that they're going to
Yeah.
spread onto other people like a cancer. And then what do you think's going to happen when these people start adopting that cancer of an idea? And it's like, you're not solving the problem. You're not even putting a band-aid on it. You're just basically removing it and putting it somewhere else to make it cause a bigger problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that person needs more support. And if the industry can't be in position to do it, or the organization, then that is going to be a negative outcome for everybody, for the customers, for the other people that are on that team, for leadership. It just becomes a bigger problem. It takes one problem, puts a magnifying glass on it so we can all see it, but it's not actually changing anything for sure.
Right,
You
for
know?
sure. Yeah, no, I get it. And it's crazy because it's like that's your answer to everything. Well, I'm just going to put a band-aid on it. Like we can't use this archaic principle of, well, they'll suck it up, they'll figure it out because it's going to cause more problems, and then we'll have that friction of, old school thinking versus the newer school thinking where these younger generation now are just like, well, I'm not going to put up this crap no more. I don't want to do this anymore. But then we view it as, oh, they just don't want to work. No, they just got tired of dealing with the same crap that we're dealing with all these years. And they're finally not afraid to say, well, I just don't want to do this.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Yep, absolutely. If there was an idea, I think, culturally, where if you work hard, it pays off in the long run. It's an investment in your time and your future. It's, sweat equity or a little bit of elbow effort or whatever it may be. And then it pays off in the long run. But unfortunately, it doesn't feel like we live in a world where that feels attainable for people. Sometimes it feels like the more they work, the less they get,
Yeah.
financially, definitely emotionally, mentally. But they do get rewarded with more work. If you're the most talented person on your team, you're doing a lot of stuff, the reward is more work. And if that
Yep.
doesn't come with more compensation or more downtime or appreciation, or like at least more autonomy with how you work and getting to choose about how you show up, then there isn't a lot of incentives. In fact, we take a really motivated person and demotivate them by putting them in that environment. And we see that a lot in a lot of different environments, contributing to burnout specifically.
So, Garrett, I did want to ask you about your being a hypnotherapist. Like, what
Yeah.
got you into that? I mean, that's kind of an interesting area to be in, though. I mean, is it something you've always kind of been interested in, or was it something you stumbled across and were like, well, hey, listen, this is kind of interesting. Let's go check it out. And then it ended up being something you really enjoyed?
Yeah. I used to work at a pretty large corporation and had people on my team, and I would always sacrifice my sleep to try to make up for, not enough hours in the day is what it felt like
Yeah.
for me. What it really was inefficient systems and inability to like really manage the stress of the position. So I would skip out on some sleep to try to make up for it. And so I found this idea of non-sleep deep rest. This is back in like 2016, where it's 2 to 3 minutes, maybe sometimes 5, and it gives you essentially the same value of restoration to your nervous system as like 20 or 30 minutes of sleep. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then there's ideas out there that 30 minutes of sleep is like a full 90 minutes of a full sleep cycle. So it's like, oh, maximum opportunity here. We have 5 minutes and I'm going to get 90 minutes worth of restorative. The easiest way to get into that state, it seemed like, was going into a hypnotic state. That's same state, and that state is kind of a theta state. It's something that's similar to what people experience when they're in that trance-like state of hypnosis. So I went and reached out to a hypnotherapist, and we went through a couple sessions. And at the end of 90 days, after working with them for those 6 or 7 sessions, I forget now, I didn't really feel like anything was different, but my sleep was better. My back pain was gone. My hips were better. I was having more fun at work. Everyone else was joking around. And then we had these spreadsheets that would come out every day, every hour, really. But at the end of 90 days, the amount of effort it took me to get through my day versus what we were seeing return on the spreadsheet was pretty impressive. So at the end of that, I was like, okay, there's something real going on here. Apparently I'm the jerk. I'm the bottleneck for everybody else. And if I'm not doing okay, then everything's suffering. And the better I'm doing, the better everybody else is. And this is a really powerful, simple, relaxing tool that seemed to make a lot of impact in substantial ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. That's interesting though, because it's, like I said, it's crazy how people get into certain areas because it's always interesting to the story because it's like, well, how did you get there? Well, I went through it myself when I tried it, in your situation, you tried it and you're like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. And sleep is a very important thing. I think not a lot of people get it. I interviewed a woman that actually her title is actually, she's a sleep expert for the FBI. And we didn't really get into what she did with the FBI on the camera, but we talked a little bit on the side. But she basically, like, her study of sleep is very interesting because she's like, well, third shift workers, what did she say? She said, my job is basically a carcinogen because the fact that I work
Yeah.
overnight and my circadian sleep rhythm was all off because during the day, I'm used to, being sleeping at night, I'm awake, so it kind of throws you off a bit. So, I get the lack of sleep thing, man. There's like when I was recording the early stage of this show, I was trying to do too much. I'm trying to do 20 different episodes. Every day of the week, I was doing a different episode. I was like, yeah, that doesn't work out too well for me. Now I've learned and lived experience that now it's easier the way I've set it up now because now I prioritize my sleep first because if not,
Yeah.
we all know what's going to happen next and your mental health will come into play. So my anxiety will get worse and my depression will get worse. And then we know how those things like to feed off each other. So, then it gets wilder from there. So,
Yeah, it's almost like a tailspin in a airplane, right? How do you get the one thing to pull up on, right? And sometimes if you can get quality of sleep, it's the one thing that can lead over into every other area. It's a really powerful intervention.
so, Garrett, for everybody at home that doesn't know what a hypnotherapist does, what is the ideal client for you? Or what kind of things do people usually come and see you for?
Yeah, so a lot of people show up because they have a pretty strong feelings of imposter syndrome. They also have some feelings of perfectionism that show up where they're like questioning themselves. They know what they believe, what they feel, and then they see their behavior and they notice that gap and they're a little frustrated there because they feel like I should just be able to do this. Or they're sitting there and they're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, getting frustrated, knowing what they want to do and how to do it, but still not taking action on it. And a lot of that stems from some subconscious beliefs that they have based upon how they grew up and some adaptive things they learned in their painful past learning that they've outgrown that aren't really adaptive anymore for them in their current environment, but still show up because they were so adaptive for them at one time. And so helping them make that process a little bit easier to make that shift is really powerful for people.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I know you work with executive founders and entrepreneurs. What is the number one thing you seem to find that comes up commonly amongst them that they have issues with? Is it imposter syndrome or is it more like, is it something else that we may not even think of? Because we see these high executives and founders and stuff, we see them as an image for a lot of people, like, the founder of whatever company you pick, boom, like Jeff Bezos, for instance. And, if Jeff were to come to you, what is the number one thing a lot of people usually say that there are a lot of issues that come up that with them a lot of times because, we just see them as executives, all these big high powered associates, but we really don't see them as people. So, it gets interesting when you get somebody that works with them to get an idea of what some of the things they deal with, basically.
Yeah, and I can't speak specifically to Jeff because I don't know
No,
him.
I'm just saying in general, but, I was using Jeff as an example for people that know who it was. I could go up with, we could say Bill
Yeah.
Gates or anybody else, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just using the most recognizable person for people as, setting the guideline for it, basically.
Yeah. So a lot of people that are in positions of power and authority, they work really hard because there's this subconscious or limiting belief they have about themselves. So they have a list of insecurities just like we all do.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the times they take action to try to prove to themselves that that insecurity is false, that reason, that belief is actually not true. And the way they do it is by going out and achieving a bunch of things. So I'm not a no good, very bad, terrible person because of all of these accolades and achievements. But the hard part is every time you get a new accolade or achievement, you kind of get on that hedonic treadmill where like a little hit of it doesn't really work as much. So you have to go back for more and a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And then each time they get that, it feels less evidence for this belief because as they get more successful, that belief also grows with them. So they never outwork that belief. And so then they get into a trouble where they do feel like an imposter or they do feel overwhelmed or they feel like they can't do anymore because they've reached the natural limit of what their human potential actually is. And yet they still don't feel okay being themselves. So that's pretty common for most of the people that I see in those positions of power and authority.
Would you say though, like when they say they don't feel like themselves, they really can't be because people see them as like, whatever their title is. They don't see them as a person. It's just this person and whatever name we want to give them, they're Cindy. Cindy can't be seen as a person because she's this high level executive. But at the end of the day, she's still human like the rest of us, And I feel like we put these people on a platform, but we don't think about the other side of the conversation of like how they're doing mentally because a lot of these guys take on a lot of weight of stuff, and all these things they have to deal with on a constant basis, their mental health status can't really be too great sometimes.
Absolutely not. Just like the rest of us, we're all going through it on our own level. And then the coping mechanisms we used to deal with it or support it are a little bit different. So for some of us, it shuts us down, overwhelms us, makes us look like, we can't move. And then other people become like, they kick into hypervigilance or like hyperperformance where they just do all the things all the time. And so everyone has their own different coping mechanism, how they deal with those insecurities and those fears and frustrations that show up. And some of them are adaptive in the short run, but anytime we only have one type of coping mechanism and we really, really run with it, it does take a toll on us in the long run. So trying to be able to figure out how to add more well-being into their life seems to be the most helpful thing for anybody. Day-to-day Joes and, all the pros out there too.
Well, the next question obviously is going to be, is like, what kind of coping mechanisms do you suggest to these guys? Like, I mean, I know you help them keep maintaining relationships because obviously their work schedules aren't ideal for like a normal relationship for a lot of people. They got to constantly be on the call and things like that too. So what kind of stuff do you suggest to them sometimes?
Yeah, I think if we start broadening, like you mentioned, their identity, if we think of this person only as that, that's fine for us because we don't know them, we're not them. But if they themselves only think of themselves as their title or their position, then that's a really dangerous position for them to be in on an existential level because they can easily lose that title or that position. They could be fired, they could be let go, their company could go bankrupt. And so we do need to broaden their identity and like the terms that they think about themselves over time. They're not just, in charge of the organization. They're also, someone's daughter, someone's
Hmm.
son, someone's father, someone's, mother, someone's friend, someone's caretaker. And so that idea of being able to expand what it means to be them across multiple horizons is really important. But that's a bigger, longer term project. In the short run, we really need to be able to make sure that they can spend as much time in their window of tolerance as possible. If they're really stressed out and then they're going to recover, they're going to be really underneath for a long time. And when you have to make decisions of both of those things, it gets really challenging. It's this like whiplash effect. And so instead, if we can kind of get them into a more regulated state more consistently and stay there, it becomes a little bit easier to get through their day to day, which gives us enough bandwidth to then start working on some of those longer term situations.
Yeah, no, I agree. If we start working now to a better goal, it's a lot easier for them, especially in their a lot of their high powered positions and all the stress that comes with it. Because us average Joes, we're out there stressing out too. But it's like I said, I think that whole pedestal thing is just it's kind of overplayed nowadays if you think about it. Because we're all at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all deal with the same thing. They have mental issues just like the rest of us have. But my next thought is like, why do you think people don't talk about their mental health issues? Like I know people say we do, but let's really look at it when we really analyze it. If you really look at it, when these people talk about some of them I feel like they just use it as like, oh, it's the next hot topic for the month. Oh, well, Suicide Awareness Month. Watch how many people's videos come out. And then after that, watch how many of them don't say anything else about the topic afterwards. And I feel like a lot of people downplay it, but at the same time, it's a big enough issue that it keeps reoccurring that, we need to do something about this epidemic. This is going to become a problem where it's going to be like, cancer, was like out of control in the beginning, but we got to get it back under control. You know what I'm saying though?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mental health is a real issue. And it's not just mental health because it's also physical
Hmm.
and emotional and social health, right? If people have a really challenging like social economic status growing up, that affects their health, but it also has effects on their mental health. Knowing what zip code you were raised in can predict your outcome of health and mental health almost more than any other factor. And so it's not just this like one isolated thing. To separate them out is really challenging. We have to kind of address it across the board. And I think here in the States, we kind of have this idea of like sink or swim, success or nothing, right? All or nothing kind of mindset when it comes to our healthcare, our health, our mental health, our financial success. And we really have a hard time when you're not doing well at that or when it feels like it could be taken away at any time. And that's true if you're making, paycheck to paycheck at any level, whether that's, 300,000 or $3 million a year or $3,000 a month. Like that feeling feels the same for most of us. So
Yeah.
it's really challenging if you don't think that if you can take a break or slow down or take a day off, that you're still going to be okay. That right there can just exasperate every little incident or insecurity or genetic inheritability that we have and then amplify it to the point where it's really unmanageable.
I did want to touch on the social aspect.
Yeah.
We have to compare it. If we compare it to like when I was younger, we only
Yeah.
had AOL and that was your only social thing. Besides that, actually socialize with people. Nowadays, you have endless amounts of apps. And, now you have multiple people from different platforms adding more and more to it, to that factor of like, a lot of people, ways they hook you in is that FOMO. They don't want you to fear of missing out, basically. You don't want to miss out on anything. And that's how they get you into that endless doom scroll where you got people sitting there, if you really go most places and you watch them, they're all just, and
Yeah.
that's the problem these days. So it's like there's so much information coming in and there's so much crap coming in, though. If you think about it, too, all the false information these people come with, all the false rhetorics and things that go out there, people
Yeah.
saying all these different things, it's got to be hard for you to combat that sometimes, because you're getting multiple attacks from different which ways you think about it, everybody's getting their information how they want it, depending on whatever source they pick. We know TikTok seems to be the most favorite one nowadays. Used to be you could find everything on eBay. Now it's apparently TikTok's the new eBay, basically. Essentially, if you think about it, because people reference it all the time. In any
Yeah.
social media source, it still kind of feels the same way, though. Like you have all these people putting out all this false information. So, do you find that as something that you got to combat a lot of times? Like, listen, well, I know this is what you heard, but that's not the correct information.
Yeah, I think anytime there's new informational sources out there, it's really challenging. There's like the whole idea of yellow journalism back in the day where people just
Hmm.
print all types of stories when newspapers were the
Yes.
thing. And even when radio became the thing where it felt like someone like the voice of God was talking to you in this disembodied voice in your living room, in your garage, at work, in your headphones. And now we have, social media where it's on
Hmm.
all the time and it's every channel. Back when it was TV and you had like 3 channels, you'd flip through and okay, we're done here. And then it was 30 and you flip through and you're like, oh, there's nothing I want to watch. And then it's 300. Now there's no end. You will never reach the end of any of the content. It just
Yes.
keeps going. So there's no
God, yes.
natural break. There's no way to be like, oh, I guess this is it. I got to get up and move now. That doesn't happen. And so I do think we get stuck in that loop now and they exploit it more than ever, which is great for them, I guess, and challenging for the rest of us. And then you're right. There is a lot of people talking. And so everyone's trying to share their version of what makes sense to them in a language that they can understand something. And that game of telephone, when it goes from like a peer-reviewed research
Oh,
with
love it.
experts,
Great context. I love it.
and then it goes out to someone who knows a little bit, and then it goes out to someone who knows a little bit. And by the time it gets to the end user and it's reaching them, in their down moments in between their day, the reality versus the intent and what it means, it is challenging to navigate that. But I do think that there are people that are rising to the occasion. There's actually like researchers that talk about communication and how to do that well, and they're getting on the apps. So now, a research lab will have someone who their whole job is to film TikToks, to actually go and collapse that telephone down. So it's just them two there, which is great. It's democratized media. You don't have to go place an ad for millions of dollars to get your message out there now. Yeah. Yeah.
Same time, people get the wrong information. So when someone does come out and share their story, we for example had a woman on the show named Maddie Andrews. She came and was sharing her story. And Garrett, when I tell you this woman's story was that crazy, like she started telling people on the internet about it. People were telling her go to the mental hospital. She's like, well, I've already been there. Too late. Beat you to the punch. Like
Yeah.
things like that. It's hard for people to share these things because you don't know what they're going to react because of negativity alone. It just
Sure.
kill you there because a lot of people, that's all they worry about. They don't care about the positive comments. They're looking at those negative ones. And especially somebody who deals with anxiety like me, I'm like, I filter through stuff. I'm like, I don't even pay attention, honestly, but I could see other people hyper fixating on that one comment somebody said, oh, I don't like something. And then they just stare at it all day and just go crazy about it, And then, the other thing is too, we have to worry about what message are we sending our youth though these days too, because they see all these things. They see all these people doing all these crazy things and they think, oh, it's okay. Let me go do it too. Like, remember Jackass back in the day? Like, we all thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Nowadays, these kids are doing even crazier things. And then we're getting mad at them, but it's essentially the same thing we were doing before. I mean, like, you're getting mad at them about what? They're doing the same thing we were doing back in the 90s. Maybe not
Yeah.
as intensely crazy, like some of these ice buckets and all these other crazy challenges people are coming up with that people recreate without thinking about it, kind of thing. And it's just like, you just sit there, laugh and go, God help us all, because it's like, it's kind of too much like a sheepish type thing. Like people too many times just kind of fall into this trend and they don't think about it because it's like, well, my friends are going to go do it, so I should go too. It's just like that question mom always asks you. Garrett, would you go jump off a bridge all your friends did? You're like, no. Okay, so then why are you following them all? Well, because I don't want to be left out of the crowd. That FOMO comes back into place again. God, let's
Yeah.
not miss out on these kind of things.
Yeah. And I love what you brought up there. There's like two inherent evolutionary things, our negativity bias, right? So if there's that bush rumbling, like either we could be lunch or it could be lunch. Well, it's safer for me if I don't find out, right? So we're always thinking about the negative to protect us. So that one comment, that negative one is the one it's hard to not think about that one. You actually actively have to do that. And then the other piece you mentioned there, kind of two things, is if we hear a message repeated enough, it becomes more challenging for us to critically think about it. And if we're receiving information passively, like in a radio program or on TV or in these TikToks, we just begin to believe it as if it's true. And it's not until we share it with a real person through dialogue where they challenge the assumption that we're stating that we have to then go back and retrieve the belief for it, that we figure out, oh, wait a minute, this isn't as accurate as I thought it was because we took it in passively. And we see that in like learning models where it's like active retrieval and like actually developing mastery of a subject. It takes time. But we have people that have this really informed opinion because they've experienced a lot of the same message over and over again, but they've never tried it on with real people in the real world. And so they actually have this belief that's really shaky that they feel very grounded and emotionally. And then when they look around, we have this social creature bias, right? We think that even if you're in jail, we put you in solitary confinement, that that's cruel and unusual punishment. We're so driven to be close to people that if you put someone in a position of authority and they give you two lines and one's clearly bigger than the other, and you're in a room with 10 other people and they go, oh yeah, these lines are the same. It's easier for you to stand up and be like, yep, they're the same, because you don't want to be the weird person standing up and being like, no, clearly they're
Exactly.
two separate ones. Because that feels so dangerous to us because we want to be close to people. So you're right. This media and the way it's done now and the way we consume it does create like a confluence of all these factors that is challenging our ability to maintain like a nice, cohesive worldview that's healthy for us. Yeah, it is challenging for people out there, for sure.
I feel as people are scared to go against the grain because they don't want to be the different one. Or what is it, the Nick Swanson joke where he's talking about, I'm the guy that brings the crystal meth cupcakes to the party and I look like the weirdo, because you're pointing out the things that don't make sense, you know?
Yeah.
Or what I'm thinking of, you know, I don't know if you're a big movie guy, but Idiocracy with Luke Wilson, where he goes, falls in that capsule and he comes back and he's like an average Joe and he's the smartest guy out of all the people that recreated or whatever, you know? And he's like,
Yeah.
so using energy drink to water your plants, it makes no sense. You know, like do you feel like, I think that people always look for the negative of everything too. They're like, oh, well, I was misdiagnosed. Yes, but you have to remember, if you were diagnosed in the 90s, it's possible they didn't have the same information that we have now, you know, because with anything, it evolves over time. You know, we learn new things, you know, like the same thing with cancer. We've learned new things over time. Same with AIDS, where at first they thought it was only homosexuals that were the reason that AIDS had even existed, when it really wasn't the case, you know, because people just started making up these stories. Oh, well, it's because, you know, it's because you're homosexual. That's why you have, you know, it's just stupid. To me, it's just dumb. Maybe I'm just I'm a different thinker about these things. I just look at these and go, this is just stupid. Like, you guys make no sense. Like, you know, you look at people starting these campaigns and things like that to start driving people to get excited, and they always look at to prey on their fears. And then people are like, oh, that's wrong. Well, they've been doing that for years. They act like that's anything new. Really, honestly, you think about it. How do you think they get you a lot of times? They don't want you to be the one that's the weird one and then be ostracized by the rest of the crowd because you're the one that has a different thinking than everybody else. But you could be correct 100%. But, you know, with social media pumping out all this other crap, it's like, you know, you got to fight through the filter of that. You got to be like, oh, well, no, hey, listen to me. I'm the guy who's trained in this. I know what I'm talking about. Don't listen to that guy over there. And they're like, well,
Yeah.
how do we know you're not the imposter? You know, that one of those situations that come up, you know, kind of thing. And it's just like, it drives me insane some days. It's like, oh, God, help me out. Like, some days I'm just like, I look at my feeds and I'm like, yeah, I'm done with the internet today. Because like, you'll get to that one thing where you're just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm done with the internet. This exists. I'm done. It's the one I think of though is this kid. He gets on there. He's like, I forgot what he was doing. He like always jumps off onto something. He had a bunch of cheese graters and barbed wire. Okay.
Okay.
The logic behind this guy, he's like, I'm something, like he goes, bleep this, and he starts like swearing beside. He goes, jumps into the thing and he just starts screaming in pain and go, and people are watching this? I'm like, come on, this poor guy clearly is not all there's, and you're watching him self-mutilate himself by landing on cheese graters, refrigerators, and all this other weird stuff, but we're watching this kind of crap go on, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's somebody's comment to me though, Garrett, was, oh, that's my hero. I'm like, I hope you're kidding me, because that is just not a hero right there. That's just something else.
Yeah.
I just don't get the internet, man. Maybe I'm just out. The internet's just not the place for me at times. Like, these people make me worry about the crap they're posting out there.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes we have fringe content, fringe beliefs out there. And then, you know, anything new, novel, interesting, and different from the norm is also fascinating. You know, when we're driving down the freeway and we see an accident, it's hard not to look, right?
Yeah, the whole
And so,
rubberneck mentality. Yep, I got you. Okay. All
yeah.
right. Good point. Good point.
And I think the internet traffics in that. Like, that's actually a lot of what gets attention is that type of messaging. And it's something that gets you amped up or gets your interest, right? In the 80s, it used to be sex that would sell. So you'd have a
Hmm.
cheeseburger from Carl's Jr. and it was like, you know, a scantily clad woman moving erotically eating a cheeseburger. And they thought that was the like gold standard for getting people's attention. But now I think we understand that it's probably easier to get curiosity, outrage, or like morbidity. And
With
that loops
you.
people in.
I
Yeah.
think the outrage one is the biggest one too, because if you start putting out something people don't believe, people tend to comment negative things. And then that's when you really get the interesting comments. Like, if you go to some of these videos and read the comment sections,
Yeah.
it's like a jungle warfare in there. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, and I reference a lot of times like Call of Duty, you know, because when the internet first was introduced with people being able to play online with other people,
Yep.
those rooms were horrible. The things we
Yeah.
would say to each other, gosh, we couldn't even repeat them nowadays without getting banned on most of these sites now because now they're finally policing them, you know?
Moderating. Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have to moderate their stuff now, and they're like, "I got to take care of this." Well, yeah, look at what people are posting, dude. You got these people posting crazy things, telling other people to go kill themselves. All these things, but you don't seem to think that's a problem. All of a sudden, because now you have to get up, clean your room. You have to clean up your metaphorical room and go clean up your
Yeah.
mess over here. Now you don't. Now you're upset because you have to do that. Like, get out of here. Like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, and we have something like FCC for radio and TV. We have some of those like protections in place where if you're going to post something, you're going to have to be responsible for it. And it can be a criminal negligence and it can also be a civil one. But when it comes to the internet, there's a lot less of that going on. There's not a lot of like legal
Less accountability,
cases.
wouldn't you say?
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
So, Garrett, we're at the fun part of the show. I don't know if you ever watch one of these episodes. I'm going to ask you two questions. I ask all my guests the same questions. And the answer, there's no wrong answer to these questions, okay? So just so you know, I don't want you to feel like you're under the gun here. You got answered. So the first one is actually a very interesting question, okay? If your mental health had a song, what would that song be?
Interesting.
Oh, I like the response. So he got real excited. In case you don't watch this, Garrett like, oh, okay, I like this one.
Yeah. There's a Foo Fighters song, All My Life. All my life I've been looking for something. Something never comes, never leads to nothing. Nothing satisfies, but I'm getting close. That like driving beat, I have ADHD and I didn't know that until I was in my 40s. And it was a pretty big wake up call. But like looking back over my life, that kind of felt like the theme song. No matter what I was doing, I was like, this is getting almost I feel good, but more would be better almost no matter what it was, whether it was skateboarding, whether it was like having an energy drink, whether it was like reading a book, it didn't matter. It was always that like, this isn't quite satisfying. I need more.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good theme song for most of my life.
I like that. That's a good answer. See, Foo Fighters is the first time it showed up since I've been asking this question. We've had Rage Against the Machine. Michael Jackson's come up. The Doors have come up. We've got a lot of interesting answers because when I ask you that question, it's always fun because it's always a response. The look on their faces when I say it, they're like, well, hold on, okay, yeah, all right, this is a good one, okay. Because you got to think, though, in the 90s, so we had, remember the X Games, like it was always something extreme. So that plays into it, though, you wanting that more because that's how we all were kind of raised the same way a little bit. Just like, ooh, we really want it more, because I was diagnosed with or ADD at first, and I was like, I don't know if that's really the case. And then later on, I figured out when I had gone to therapy again to start fixing my problems I was having because mine come from when I was abandoned as a kid. So like a lot of I didn't realize the ripple effect. The same thing, like after looking back, I started noticing different things that fell into the category ADHD versus ADD. But then again. The 90s is when I grew up. We didn't know as much as we know now. So like testing is a little different. So I can't get mad and be like, oh, well, they misdiagnosed me and then get all mad at people because it's not their fault. They did what they had. So the next question, and the reason I started this whole podcast is that if you could break the stigma about mental health. Now, when I say that, I mean something you see on a regular basis that you're just like, want people to stop listening to. Like, hey, guys, I understand this is what you heard, but this is the actual facts.
Yeah. I always see, how do I say this? On the internet, right? When we're scrolling, one of the memes that I see come up a lot is like, men will do anything but go to therapy. And so like, you'll see these really like stories, songs, music, movies, and like, it is therapeutic to create art. Like it is helpful for people to have that creative outlet to do something for it. But also it doesn't have to be that hard. You don't have to be this tortured soul to create art. And I think that idea that people have that like you have to be tortured to create art from your misery becomes art. And I don't know if that's entirely true. It can also come from joy and awe. And you can have a healthy, enjoyable experience to be you and still create art and creativity and enjoyment in life. And I think that like stigma of mental health often gets tied into some of those ideas about what we think of as artistic expression.
Let's touch on that really quick before we wrap up. Why do you feel that men don't talk about their mental health more? Do you think it's because the influence of what we've been instilled over the years? Or do you just feel like some of us are just too scared to accept the fact that we have feelings?
Yeah, I think for a long time, especially here in the West, we've discounted emotions. We've prioritized logic, reason, and willpower as the only thing that matters. In ancient Greek philosophy, they talk about this as like, the logic, reason, willpower is closer to godliness, and like anger, frustration, sex, hunger, thirst is close to beastliness. And so the fact that we have reason and instincts means that we're like almost beast and almost God. And that is like a very strange view when you start thinking about it, because if you didn't have the ability to experience emotion, like if you had a head trauma where you were no longer able to experience emotion and you just had pure logic, reason, willpower, you can't come to a satisfying conclusion. You can never arrive at an aha moment that feels satisfying. So real, true reasoning involves emotions and reason together working as a team to move you forward. And we would divorce the two and we separate them and we prioritize one over the other. And when we say that's what it means to be a man, is this unfeeling, uncaring, unempathetic, passionate. Like maybe we stamp out some of the worst despair, but we also eliminate all the joy that we can feel too. And then we're sandwiched into this like middle ground where if we don't have access to those positive experiences over the long run of a lifetime, as you continue to experience the frustrations of life, it's going to get harder and it's going to be more challenging to feel like you're doing an even keel. And it's going to be more and more of a mask. And I think that fear of admitting that that is a mask and that there is something underneath here and that you haven't felt any of this good stuff, I think comes from prioritizing logic, reason, and willpower at the expense of emotions.
Yeah, whatever Garrett just said over there, guys, I agree with him, okay? I'm joking, Jack. No, but man, listen, I appreciate you being here today. I really do, man. Thanks for coming. As we start getting ready to wrap up, do you want to let everybody know where they can get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? I know you're on a lot of different social sites, but what is the best way to reach Garrett if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, if they want to reach out to my website at gnosistherapy.com, they're more than welcome to do that. It's my emails there too. It's my first name and then gnosistherapy.com. But if they want to if they're on social media and they're on Instagram, they can reach me there also at Gnosis Therapy. Or if they want to be very professional, they can reach me on the professional side at LinkedIn on gnosistherapy.com.
I like how he says that. He goes, if you want to reach the professional side of Garrett, it's okay. Alrighty. Well, with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. Garrett, thanks so much for coming hang out, man. I had a great time talking to you. I really appreciate you being here. And everything like that, man. It's like I said, just keep doing what you're doing, man. I think you're doing great work out there. I'll definitely have to follow you on Instagram and everything else and keep up with you and stuff like that. Guys, go check out Garrett. Reach out to him if you have any questions or anything like that. He's glad to answer them for you. Remember, if you want the professional side, go to the LinkedIn page, guys. Come on now.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It was a pleasure to be here.
No, man. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. You guys are going to find me on Pete vs. Anxiety. I'm on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to iHeartRadio and Pandora Radio, too. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do can save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today?